The demonic parasites. Are parasites actually demons in biological form? The existence of parasites that have the ability to hijack a person's mind sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, such as the movie The Faculty. The Faculty is a science fiction movie about high school teachers being controlled and taken over by otherworldly parasites. As the old saying goes, art imitates life, and truth is far stranger than fiction. In ancient China, the Taoists had a very interesting belief concerning parasites. The Taoists believe in a concept known as the three worms. The Sanxi, three corpses, or Sangchong, three worms, are a Taoist physiological belief that demonic creatures live inside the human body and they seek to hasten the death of their host. These three supernatural parasites allegedly enter the person at birth and reside in the three dantian energy centers, respectively located within the head, chest, and abdomen. After their human host dies, they are freed from the body and become malevolent spirits. The three corpses work to harm their host's health and fate by initiating sickness, inviting other disease-causing agents into the body, and reporting their host's transgressions to the gods. The usual English translation of Sanxi is three corpses. However, this Taoist term does not literally refer to corpses as in dead bodies within the human body, but is linguistically causative, meaning the eventual death, mortality, produced by these demonic agents. Now, I myself am not a Taoist, nor do I believe in Taoism. However, I believe they have a very good point about parasites being demons in biological form. Parasites and demons are incredibly similar, if not the exact same. They are two sides to the same coin. In fact, demons are often called spiritual parasites. A parasite is a biological organism that lives and feeds off of its hosts and causes mental and physical illness. They are known to feed off of their host's negative emotional energy and are known to bring the host physical and mental illness. Studies have shown that parasites are able to cause severe mental illnesses such as schizophrenia. Scientists have discovered how the toxoplasmosis parasite may trigger the development of schizophrenia and other bipolar disorders. They have shown that the parasite may play a role in the development of these disorders. Clinical studies frequently report that patients with major mental illness, such as schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, have comorbid physical conditions, suggesting that systematic alterations affecting both brain and peripheral tissue might underlie the disorders. Numerous studies have reported elevated levels of anti-T Gandhi antibodies in patients with major mental illnesses. The T Gandhi parasites are so powerful that they can hijack a person's mind and alter humans' sexual desires and influence humans to engage in abnormal sexual practices such as BDSM and have an attraction to sexual violence. So what is the T. Gandhi parasite? Toxoplasmosis is an infection caused by a single-celled parasite called Toxoplasma gondii. While the parasite is found throughout the world, more than 40 million people in the United States may be infected with the Toxoplasma parasite. The Toxoplasma parasite can persist for long periods of time in the bodies of humans and other animals, possibly even for a lifetime. Of those who are infected, however, very few have symptoms because a healthy person's immune system usually keeps the parasites from causing illnesses. However, pregnant women and individuals who have compromised immune systems should be cautious. For them, a toxoplasma infection could cause serious health problems. I recently found an interesting case study concerning this very powerful and influential parasite titled "The Case for Toxoplasma gondii in Psychosis and Other Human Diseases." This chapter introduces Toxoplasma gondii, the cause of toxoplasmosis. It discusses the many ways it can be transmitted and what is known about human infections, especially those affecting the brain, the pregnant uterus, and the eyes. It details the evidence linking this parasite to psychosis and estimates the percentage of psychosis cases that may be caused by it. It also briefly discusses the evidence linking toxoplasmosis to other conditions, epilepsy, brain cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, and motor vehicle accidents. The T. gondii parasite has been called one of the most successful parasites on Earth, and yet is one of medicine's best kept secrets. It is remarkable in its ability to infect nearly any nucleotide cell in any warm-blooded animal, and infects most species of mammals and birds. An estimated 1/3 of the world's humans are infected, although this varies widely by country, depending on dietary habits and exposure to cats. A 2014 survey in the United States reported that 11% of the population, or approximately 40 million Americans, have antibodies to this parasite, indicating past infection. For almost a century after its discovery, it remained largely unknown. It was given a tongue-twisting name, Toxoplasma gondii, which was in fact inadvertently misspelled. The North African rodent in which it was discovered in 1908 was a Gundii, not a Gondii. It is a protozoan parasite, not bacteria or viruses, which were the infectious agents of the greatest interest in the 20th century. The most noteworthy protozoan is the malaria parasite. T. gondii, as it is commonly abbreviated, is a second cousin to the malaria parasite. But like famous humans, second cousins don't get much press. It wasn't until 1938 that T. gondii was known to be transmitted from a pregnant woman to her fetus and to cause severe problems with brain development. And it was not until the late 1960s that cats were identified as the specific host for this parasite. T. gondii has to be eaten by a cat to complete its life cycle in the cat's intestine. It begins its life cycle when a cat, usually as a kitten, becomes infected. Although the cat usually has no symptoms, it excretes in its feces up to 50 million infective T. gondii oocytes per day for an average of 8 days. At any given time, approximately 1% of cats are infective and are excreting oocytes. The oocytes are remarkably hardy and can survive for long periods in soil or water. Wherever the cat defecates may become contaminated with infectious oocytes. Since cats prefer loose soil for defecation, this often includes gardens, children's sandboxes, and animal feed piles and barns. After 24 hours, the oocytes dry out and are thought by some researchers to become aerosolized, thus floating in the air and capable of being inhaled. Water becomes contaminated when cat feces deposited on the ground is carried into streams by rainwater or when cat litter is flushed down the toilet. Not all cats are carriers of this parasite, but they can be. It's incredibly interesting finding out that cats are the specific host for this very powerful parasite that can hijack the mind and cause very serious physical and mental issues. Now, I myself used to own a cat that I loved very much that passed away from liver complications back in February. And I do not believe that cats are intrinsically evil. However, the topic of cats being hosts for parasites that can alter the mind and body in negative ways reminds me of a question I used to have. Why were cats worshipped by the ancient Egyptians, and why do witches love cats as well? Apparently, in ancient Egypt, cats were not worshipped as gods per se, but as vessels for them. The ancient Egyptians believed that cats were chosen to be inhabited by the gods, and that some of the divinities even adopted their likeness. For example, Bastet, also called Bast, was the daughter of Ra, the sun god. And when it comes to the occult, cats, specifically black cats, have played a huge role in mythology for centuries. In the Middle Ages, they were believed to be a spirit or demon to serve a witch as a companion. I find it incredibly fascinating that the ancient Egyptians and ancient witches believed that cats can be vessels for spirits. And as it turns out, cats can be vessels for very powerful parasites that does to the body what demons have been known to do to the body in the scriptures, such as cause you to hear voices, experience negative emotions such as anxiety, depression, OCD, bipolar disorder, and many other mental illnesses. Demons can hijack your mind and influence you to do destructive things, such as engaging in abnormal sexual practices like promiscuity and BDSM. Aside from cats being specific vessels for these very powerful parasites, other carriers can include all the unclean animals that were spoken of in the scriptures: pigs, rats, shellfish, fish without scales, and many other animals listed in scripture as unclean to consume. Maybe there is both a spiritual and physical reason as to why God said not to consume these animals. In fact, the Most High calls these animals an abomination, and that we shall not eat their flesh. In biblical usage, the word abomination means something that God loathes or hates because it is offensive to him and his character. After all, an unclean animal was a chosen host by the unclean spirits known as Legion. So is it possible parasites are actually demons in biological form? A biological antenna for the spiritual wickedness in high places. Is this how they are able to cause so much pain, sicknesses, diseases, and other physical and mental torment? The spiritual parasites. Did you guys know that the phrase out-of-body experience was coined by a man named Robert Monroe? Robert Allen Monroe was a radio broadcasting executive who became known for his research into altered states of consciousness and for founding the Monroe Institute. In his 1971 book, Journeys Out of the Body, he is credited with coining the term out-of-body experience. He is one of the first well-known researchers into exploring altered states of consciousness and other dimensions. Some of the methods he used when it comes to exploring other dimensions is astral projection, sensory deprivation, and something called sleep learning. Sleep learning is an attempt to convey information to a sleeping person, typically by a sound recording to them while they sleep. According to Robert Monroe's own account, while experimenting with sleep learning in 1958, Monroe experienced an unusual phenomena, which he described as sensations of paralysis and vibrations accompanied by a bright light that appeared to be shining on him from a shallow angle. Monroe recorded his account in his 1971 book, Journeys Out of the Body, and went on to become a prominent researcher in the field of human consciousness. Monroe later authored 2 more books on his experiments with OBE, Far Journeys in 1985 and Ultimate Journey in 1994. While experimenting with out-of-body experiences, Robert Monroe encountered interdimensional entities. Reportedly, the light beings told Monroe that we are energy sources for other dimensional parasites. All the turmoil in this world aims to exploit the loosh we emanate. Loosh is a term applied to energy produced by human beings and animals that other entities use to feed from. It is also used to refer to the energy that is produced by suffering that entities feed. Loosh is a word coined by Robert Monroe in his books. These findings from having an out-of-body experience by Monroe sent Monroe into a 2-week deep depression. With the current acceleration of the electronic era, which promotes transhumanism, an array of artificial intelligence technology, both overtly and covertly, the exploitation to extract negative emotional energy from humanity is at an all-time high. Our world is being deluged with negative mind control programming and AI broadcasts that target the negative ego filters that have infiltrated every fiber of society. And what these ego filters are some of the 7 deadliest sins, such as sloth, which is laziness, gluttony, pride, lust, greed, envy, and wrath. In fact, this is one of the reasons why social media has so many users in the world, because of these 7 ego filters. This in part opened up a whole new world to negative emotional energy. Lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride destroys the human spirit. This is in order to elicit extremely negative emotions and painful trauma from the constant bombardment of harmful images, behaviors, and actions. These programs encourage cruelty, brutality, and violence, which are being massively superimposed upon humanity and earthly kingdoms at this time. Extremely charged negative emotional energy such as that achieved during satanic ritual abuse contains hormonal adrenaline cascades that run through the cellular energy within the human body, blood, and brain. Under such intense extremes of painful suffering, the blood and flesh becomes charged with heightened molecular content, which is highly prized by these dark wicked spirits and satanic forces. This is the reason they delight in torture, suicide, and killings of human beings, especially the innocent souls unable to protect themselves like children, which is one of the reasons negativity is promoted throughout the world. These entities told Monroe the greater the suffering, the more life force is spewed out of our bodies, the tastier the energy meal for our creators, these light beings. These experiences corresponds to reports of some of the world's oldest scriptures, such as the Vedas. There we read that the universe is upheld by sacrifice, and that all who are living in this world are the sacrificers. There is none living who does not perform yaga, which they call sacrifice. The body is created for sacrifice and arises out of sacrifice and changes according to sacrifice. I believe these light beings told Monroe half truth and half lies. It is true that these entities feed off negative emotional energy and want to cause as much suffering as possible. In fact, Monroe's findings corresponds with what I've learned from Dr. Jerry Marzinski, the psychotherapist that I've interviewed on my channel. And according to his own experience, he learned that interdimensional parasitic entities were harassing his schizophrenic patients, trying to get these schizophrenics to produce as much negative emotional energy as possible. Hence why the voices of schizophrenics are always negative, telling him to do bad things, hurt themselves, and hurt others. So I believe the light beings told the truth about one thing, that they do feed off negative emotional energy, and they cause much of the suffering in this world. In fact, even the Bible states in Ephesians that our battle is not flesh and blood, but with spiritual wickedness in high places. But what they did lie about is that the world was only created for sacrifice. They also lied about being the creators. They are not the creators. Throughout history, these wicked spirits that live in the high places have convinced humanity to worship them and offer them sacrifices. Much of the commandments in scripture are there to protect us from these evil entities and their influence. Things like divination, astral projection, and out-of-body experiences are not something we all should attempt on doing. Trying to explore other dimensions and getting in contact with these evil entities is going to be a snare to our soul. The Most High, like the loving Father He is, put commandments in the scriptures on how to avoid these evil entities, such as not messing with the devil's devices, mind-altering substances, divinations, witchcraft, sorcery.
Welcome to the place inside. I'm your host, Lawrence Gallian. I want you to discover the innate powers of your body-mind makeup. We were endowed by the divine by a whole range of paranormal powers. The most powerful technology that exists is within you, because you have a direct connection to, we can call it the center of the galaxy, if you will, or the ultimate reality, but you have a direct connection to it. And that connection is within inside you. You have innate abilities to manage natural, paranormal, and supernatural powers. We must be both cognitive and supernatural at the same time. Now, today we just want to talk about delusional mind parasites. This is a problem for many people, and I know many people struggle with it. And many people have it and they don't know that they have the parasites. Delusional mind parasites incarnate themselves. Now notice I say the word incarnate themselves in many people. Okay, they can take over a human being's or an alien's mind. Okay, but they cannot be the people or the aliens themselves. Clairvoyantly, I can see these mind parasites taking up residence in people's heads. I can literally see this. They live in the skull, and they treat humans as little more than vehicles, cars, if you will, to help them move around. Secondly, they project to the human in which they inhabit a world view. That's very important. We'll get into that in a moment. Almost derisively, and certainly with an air of superiority, they tell their human hosts something like this: your life is nothing but an illusion. I control you and all that you do. I create a virtual reality for you. And that's what I was getting at before. The world view. They start to make you think that the world is such and such a way, when in fact it isn't. When the world is actually very different from the way they are making you perceive it. Remember that. It is so important. They truly bewilder people, and most people have no idea that they are just a type of cyborg for these delusional mind parasites. Well, I already hear you asking the question, how do I rid myself of a parasite that has invaded my mind? Well, first, by remembering every day that you are superior to it. Remember that direct connection I told you about that you have with the center of the galaxy, the ultimate reality, the divine, however you want to represent that to yourself. But you are superior to it, because these mind parasites don't really have a full life of their own. They're kind of like machines in a way. Your origin is in what I call the imperishable realm, where the only true power dwells, superior to the parasites of chaos and their universe. Now, second, you must constantly develop your intelligence. Yes, amazingly, huh? You have to have clear thinking. If your intelligence is weak, then you are prone to deviate into this artificial reality created by the parasite. In other words, you're not clear enough to realize that the reality that's being created for you is an artificial reality. Doing mind work that involves intense concentration helps tremendously to develop your mind, to strengthen your mind. No matter if it be puzzles, chess, calligraphy, learning a musical instrument, or poring over a deep book on a profound subject, all this will protect you because it is exercising your mind. And lastly, I want to clarify this and make a strong point here. If you believe in religion, fine, but please pick a religion that forces you to give up your own innate sense of right and wrong, and then you have made a tremendous mistake. Okay? It is fine to have religious beliefs, but if they're telling you to give up what you intuitively sense as right and wrong, then get the heck out of there. Your own innate sense of what is sensible and what is absurd. You know this, you can tell this, but you have to be in touch with yourself, okay? You need both clear thinking and clear emotions. Now, when you can no longer distinguish the difference between, say, wearing a huge gold chain around your neck or a large ring, and, say, for example, a book with great wisdom inside it, well, you are lost if you don't know the difference between those two. The parasite, in this case, has won. When you prefer the company of shallow people to that of loving, truthful, sincere, and loyal friends, then again the parasite has won, my friend. Every day, if you fear you are infected, remember they are inferior to you. And fear is the greatest mind freak. That will also open the doors to the parasites. I advise you strongly to take up a spiritual path if that is what you are interested in, but a path of direct connection to the divine. This is known as mysticism, and the people who practice these spiritual practices are called mystics. Do not believe. Instead, know. Pick a spiritual path that leads you to know directly the divine, to have a direct experience of the divine.
Hi everybody! I want to talk to you about archons today. I have been doing some serious archon studying the last few weeks, and that's not me watching other YouTube videos. That's me actually in the field doing energy work on myself, on other people, and coming across archons in a way that I feel it's time for me to actually understand this phenomenon on a more deeper, more meaningful, more profound level than I'm currently understanding it. So, archons are energy parasites. They look like octopuses, squids. They have many, many arms, and those arms go into you all over the place, and they latch onto you. So if I go into someone's energy field and I want to remove one, oftentimes you can literally just pull them off. But sometimes if they're helping you overcome a vulnerability, then for me to remove it, I have to go deeper than the archon attachment itself in order to find out what it is that you need to work on. So archons attach to what makes us vulnerable, and then they make it harder for us to overcome the vulnerability. So when we overcome the vulnerability, we'll never become vulnerable again, right? Because it was so ridiculously hard that we got to the end of this and we said no more. So you see how they're helping us? Okay, so how do they manipulate us? This has been something I've been trying to figure out, is what is the archon frequency? What is the frequency they're working under, and how do we detect when we have archon attachments? Archons, there's like bajillion archons. They're some sort of alien race. Some of them are totally mindless. Some of them have more of a conscious awareness. They work with our pleasure senses, and pleasure senses as in sexuality. So this is important. I'm going to talk a little bit about energy downloads. So people talk about light codes, when the stars are shifting and we're moving in alignment and all that. We're receiving new energy downloads and light codes every single day, all day long. We're receiving downloads from the universe constantly. We have no clue it is taking place, but it's just being downloaded into our very blood, and we're receiving it within ourselves, and it's inspiring us in new ways. New approaches to life, new approaches to thinking, new approaches to people. It inspires human ascension one day at a time, right? So archons work right under our noses as well. They work with energy downloads, what you would define as energy downloads, because they're in your energy field. All right, they're not physically here. We don't physically see them, but we do get physically what is the way, how do I describe it? They do inspire shifts in our choices and our behaviors that can be physically disruptive, right? So when those many arms enter in, much like tree roots, what do they do when they get into the soil? They absorb nutrients. They're absorbing our energies, all right? And as they absorb our energies, they're emitting secretions of pleasure, energy pleasure, influencing us to keep doing the exact same thing. So as they're being fed by us, they're receiving joy juice. And it's going straight into our sacral chakra, just so you know, our sexual bodies. And it's energy information. It's energy information. And that's why we become attached to negativity, negative thoughts, negative feelings, negative choices. It sounds like they're a really terrible thing, but the only way to get rid of an archon is to overcome yourself. They just keep coming. They'll just keep coming until you start learning how to love yourself. So I had some interesting experiences Joe and I have been really going deep into this Archon thing, and we both now have a Archon removal option, because removing Archons gives you the ability to have clarity in a way that you weren't able to access it, because they kind of cover up what the true you is actually all about. Because they're blocking that energy flow, because they're feeding off of you and inspiring negativity, but they're giving you joy juice to keep you doing the same thing. That's why we need to be more self-observant. That's why we need to really take the bull by the horns here and start working with love. They can't attach to love. They can't attach to light. They're not even hungry for love or light. They're hungry for what is vulnerability. Okay.
This information is presented without any mystification from an atheistic point of view. Our pre-biblical ancestors were well educated in this matter. We also have to comprehend everything recently discovered, collecting bits and pieces, and reflecting all this on personal experience. As I seek to give you the most accurate information, everything will be updated and may be revised when new data is received. Larva can be represented as a modulated piece of information of vital force. This means larva can act as the program of the information carrier within oneself, focusing on thoughts, feelings, and images. In the same way that we are in the initial evolutionary stage of our human species, it is possible to create amulets, growth activators, recovery agents, etc. Larva is created when a person pumps it with life force unconsciously, to the point where it becomes a self-aware unit. Beginning to experience emotions, it builds an instinct for self-preservation and intelligence. That is, a person has the ability to generate a new life, their child, and begin to treat them with reverence. They treat their child like a Tamagotchi, feeding him with her life, and jealousy protects him from attacks from the outside. At the first stage, these acts are enough to maintain a fixated thought for their feeding on some problem, conflict, lust. After the larva was born and begins to cling to life, to stimulate the maternal flow of vitality, it feeds the parent body with a natural drug, triggering the necessary physiological processes in the body, and mentally, it sharpens the feeling of self-pity. A person can identify it as pity through his personality with the help of mental manipulations of the larva. It does this by erasing its existence from the recipient's consciousness. However, I have repeatedly been convinced that a person in the depths of their soul perfectly understands the state of things, if he is pressed with leading questions. For larvae, the management of the human body is not difficult. It can be controlled by anyone who is not lazy, such as the avoidance of scabies and worms. Parasites control human behavior, choosing the best conditions for their reproduction, food of the required acidity and quality, and force a person to protect these conditions from attacks from the outside. There will always be people trying to help a fading person, such as a drug addict fatally hooked on perverted pleasures. A person cannot just do the same thing as a parasite. He is by nature actually the master of his body. It is the infernal forces of society that lead us to be convinced of our insignificance in this world. Through further development and building up its body, the larva becomes, as it were, a hernia and is fixed on the corresponding organ. It's not that she is strongly attached to him, it's just that it's more convenient and easier for her to eat. For example, if thoughts are fixated on unhappy love, then it will sit on the heart. If thoughts are fixated on gluttony, then it will sit in the stomach area. On the fixation of responsibility, it will sit in the neck and shoulders area, and an unbearable burden in life will lead to sitting on the lower back. This continues for each organ, including internal ones. Larva diligently maintains internal conflict, anxiety, and fear at an optimally high level in order to beat out a new portion of nutrition from the donor every day in the form of creation energy. It is a person's birthright to receive it daily, and unfortunately, it can be lost without a trace by investing senseless efforts and failing to use it. The larva does not digest this energy and does not release it, as one might think. This is simply not possible, because this energy is eternal and cannot be destroyed. The larva embeds it into its body, but only a small percentage of what is extracted. The main part is broadcast to his God, whom he knows and sees with his own eyes. She knows for sure that the conditions for her birth were created by her God, who arranged everything in our world so that people do not have control of this process. If we were not tricked and misinformed, there would be few fools who would create vampires of themselves, sucking out life and consciousness. In case of a sudden resolution of an internal conflict or the elimination of an external problem, most often during the day, larvae may organize a new conflict of anxiety or fear. This can be experienced by everyone at any time. It is necessary to get rid of this tormenting problem, as right away we may find ourselves another that can often feel stupid and illogical. By attempting to free the larva, the withdrawal of energy is transferred to another organ, which in turn will cause deterioration and eventually failure. Theoretically, there may be several larvae, but I do not see such signs. In fact, larvae are a device that opens access to the connection of any other entities of the infernal world. If there is no singular larva on a person, then it is very difficult to use it, since there is no means of switching it. She is not at all concerned about the settlement of other parasites, which through her warm up on this volcano of life force called humans. Through it, demons can enter a person. Infernal hierarchies can take control. Psychics can connect when working with clients. Magicians can connect when performing their manipulations. Clergymen can connect when connecting to a religious egregore. And ordinary people can connect in a vampiric manner on the life force of loved ones or dependent people. That is, larva is an open window into the infernal world. In order for the infernal world to be able to connect a person to its internal network by collecting energy, it needs a connector, which is what a larva is, a self-adjusting, initiative device with its own consciousness and sufficient knowledge of human functioning. The infernal god structures and arranges the material world that is inhabited by donors in such a way that this device is guaranteed to be reproduced and embedded in every person. For this to take place on Earth through material civilizations of the demonic path of development, terrestrial systems of protection against infernal invasion were destroyed, infrastructures were demolished, the world order was reduced and fragmented, history was replaced, science was limited, medicine was reduced to the removal of symptoms of the disease, and a mass media system was introduced for the final disorientation and management of reflection. The true knowledge of the multidimensional world order has been removed from general use and replaced by that of religions. All the labor and accumulated values of a person are withdrawn, just like loan interest. In these ideal conditions, an atmosphere of uncertainty, fear, debauchery, and degradation is formed. Larva pumps the energy of creation into the infernal world. The infernal world creates conditions for larva's vital activity. And finally, the circle is closed. In the present, most people are looking for a partner, not on the principle of humanity, but one of love, consent, and worthy procreation. Similarly, larva is looking for a partner on another carrier, and can sense him from afar. She reads, simply by appearance, the degree of internal problems and complexes, nervousness and pride. Then he tests it with insults, scandal, and nonsense. The ideal partner should react accordingly. If a larva sees the prospect of cohabitation, then despite all the nonsense thrown at them, two people become a couple and will experience love and passion generated by the larva. When people are connected and new habits are created, the larva will translate this into hatred and irritation. People may break off the relationship if the connection interferes with the qualitative use of the recipient. If a couple is scandalous and continues to be frequently at the bewilderment of others, it must be understood that it is the larvae who are having sex. As a result of this process, new larvae are born. They are seeded on others, and children are connected through procreation. At the final stages of a person's life, larva, in most cases, replaces a person's consciousness with its own. Instead of our relatives and friends being themselves, we may one day discover strange creatures in their bodies, infinitely irritated, fanatical, or ardent atheists, egocentric, mentally degraded, or possibly mired in disgusting habits. This is the result of larva manifested in materiality of a person's body. Throughout one's whole life, a person faithfully and selflessly serves food. food. When he passes away, he is proud of this sacrifice. A necessary condition that the larva may be using a person is through the creation of a stable schizophrenia within him. Psychology collects an increasing number of phobias and brings them to the rank of individual diseases exceeding 1,000. The reason for all the phobias is the same. It is a consequence of the larva's vital activity. Firstly, she likes to eat regularly, tasty and varied. Secondly, by eating in this way, she expresses her individuality. Schizophrenia is a necessary brine for larva's vital activity. In most cases, brain damage is the result of a long selection of vital forces through the corresponding conflict areas, which is recorded by medicine. But causes of such may differ, with the consequences in places. Technologically, the relationship between larva and man develops as follows. Larva creates in a person the necessary level of internal conflicts, fears, phobias, passions, pride, and other vices. The worse these conditions, the better for the larva. In return for the existence of these conditions, people feed the larva with drugs. A person lives, as it were, in hell, but at the same time experiences perverse pleasure, each time waiting for a new portion, suffering from shame and cowardice, or anger and hatred, so that a person does not rebel against infernal violence. Larva forces a person to repair moral violence against anyone who cannot resist, parents over children, bosses over subordinates, developed countries over the underdeveloped. All the vicious qualities that a person experiences belong to larva: fear of being exposed, lies, self-pity, cowardness, laziness, sexual promiscuity, gluttony, and so on down the list. All of this is a reflection of the parasite's fear and attachment. Larva is afraid of exposure, and she is insatiable. The glutton tears his belly and can't get enough. The alcoholic gets drunk. The libertine stops. A person thoughtlessly attributes all these qualities to himself, standing up for its manifestation, motivating freedom of expression of personality. It makes no sense to blame the infernal world and larva in particular for making us who we are. Every day we agree to give ourselves up for use and enjoy perverted suffering in return for the next dose of the drug. Even before we were born, we decided to learn the evolutionary lesson, and now we need to treat this chase with due respect and understanding.